Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Audit and Finance Standing Committee for April 17th, 2024. It's 10 a.m. and I'd like to call the meeting to order. My name is Paul Russell and I represent Lower Sackville, and I'd like to welcome everybody here. I'd also like to acknowledge that the Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the Peace and Friendship Treaty signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. The next item on the order of business is the approval of the minutes of March 20, 2024. Thank you, Councillor Clary, for moving the adoption of those minutes. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Lovelace. Are there any errors or omissions in the minutes? Not seeing any. All in favor of the minutes, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Great, thank you. Those pass. Next item is the approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Over to the clerk. Do we have any changes for today?
No additions or deletions have been received by the clerk's office, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I have Councillor Clary moves the adoption of the order of business, seconded by Councillor Degal-Gammon, Deputy Mayor. Any changes from the committee? Not seeing any. All in favor of the order of business, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Great, we have an order of business. Business arising out of the minutes? Not seeing any call for declaration of conflict of interest. Not seeing any. That's awesome. Thank you. Motions of reconsideration, motions of rescission, consideration of deferred business, and notices of tabled matters are all none. Correspondence. Do we have any correspondence today?
No correspondence has been received by the clerk's office.
Okay, thank you. And are there any petitions?
No petitions either have been received by the clerk's office.
Great, thank you very much. And I don't see anybody in the committee saying that they have a petition. There are no presentations today. So the next item on the agenda is public participation. And this is where any member of the public can step forward and speak. We really appreciate the input from the members of public. It helps us direct, it helps us reconsider some of those things that we don't otherwise reconsider. I didn't see any names signed up on the sheet outside, and as of 4:30 yesterday, there had been no names signed up, so I'm going to reach out to the gallery and see if any members of the public in the gallery would like to step forward and address the Audit and Finance Standing Committee. Are there any members of the public who would like to step forward and address the committee? And third and final time, are there any members of the public in the gallery who would like to address the committee? Okay, thank you. Moving ahead, we have information items brought forward. There are none. So we have the Auditor General's report, item 13.1.1. This is the 2023-24 annual report and the 2024-25 audit priorities. The Auditor General is Andrew Atherton, and I invite you to step forward. And whenever you're ready, Andrew, the floor is yours.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. I'm here to discuss my annual report and to touch on our audit priorities for the next year. Won't be anything terribly surprising in here today, so I'll run through this fairly quickly and give you an opportunity to ask any questions or make any comments that you may have. So let's start with a look at what new audits were completed by our office in the last year. The change in the Auditor General in the nearly 4-month window without an AG between Evangeline's departure and my starting kind of limited the amount of work that the office was able to complete. So we were only able to release 2 new audit reports last year. Evangeline released her cybersecurity work in August, and I was here in March to do our hiring practices audit. I will say that while that's only 2 audits, those were 2 pretty significant pieces of work with a lot of good recommendations and opportunity for improvement for HRM. So not a lot, but great quality. And you can rest assured the team are hard at work on audits, on many audits right now back in the office, and we'll be looking to get back to at least our normal 4 for the coming year. Now, again, while we didn't do a lot of audit work, the team was able to complete a lot of follow-up work. You can see from this slide, we covered 7 previous audits during the year. 5 of those were first-time follow-ups, and 2 of those were revisits to see where the outstanding recommendations from our first follow-up stood. I'm going to touch on the results of those follow-ups in a couple of slides, so I'll just move along now to what we're working on right now. So as I mentioned, the team are hard at work completing a number of audits, and we're nearing completion on a couple of these. My hope is to report the enterprise risk management and business continuity planning audit we're hoping for June, but certainly we'll have them done before your election in October. We'll have those reported. Diversity inclusion will take a little bit longer. We're just getting that one started. It's a little bigger project, so I'm not going to make any commitments of whether I can get that to you before the election or whether that will be later in the fall. And I do expect both of the ongoing follow-up work, so a second look at streetlight conversion and fleet vehicle use, both of those should be reported later this spring or early in the summer. Looking at a few performance metrics for the office, you can see a slight dip in the percentage of staff time spent on audit hours. That ties back again to the 4-month gap without an Auditor General, and it just limited what the team could do. Now, the good side of that is they did some really good training in the space before I started. They did a lot of good work, so it wasn't wasted time. It just wasn't quite the level of audit hours that we would usually hope for. Moving on, you can see 100% acceptance for our recommendations. Management continues to say, yes, we agree, we're going to work on it. That's wonderful. Implementation, less wonderful, I guess I would say. Our goal is 80% after 18 months. You can see only 51%. I guess simply put, to me, that's not good enough. Our office makes recommendations to improve services and processes in HRM, and implementing those recommendations will lead to better performance. I do appreciate that this group have been regularly asking for action plans from business units, and I encourage you to continue with that process. I also see you have a status update on the information list today. I think that's another great thing to ask for, is to continue to get your action plans, get as many details as you can from auditees, and then keep pushing them. And the other thing I would say is when you have them sitting here, ask them questions. Dig into what's going on, why they haven't done this, what their plans are. The more details you can get, the better, hopefully the better outcomes that we will receive. Because 51%, it's not good enough. Okay, let's move on to what we are looking for over the next year. Got a list here of the next 4 audit topics that we intend to work on after the 3 that are in process. We haven't defined the scope for these audits, so I'll give you a real quick hit on each one, but that's just kind of an off-the-cuff take on where we might go. Once the team gets into digging into them and talking to the auditees, we'll figure out exactly what it's going to look like. So we're still open at this point. We're still figuring out what the right places within these audit topics might be. And I should also say these are in no particular order. I actually have no idea how we picked this order. It's just what they got put down as. So starting with capital budgeting, we'll roughly be looking to assess the accuracy and quality of the information that council receives when making capital budget decisions. The other piece there that intrigues me a little bit is some pretty large projects that have been happening in HRM. Things are, doing bigger than historically done, which means they're taking longer. And I'd like to have a look and see what the monitoring and tracking of some of those projects are. You folks approve budgets that are going to last multiple years, and then if things aren't getting done, how's that being managed? Are we putting forward more work than can realistically be done? You hear lots of stories of the inability to build housing, et cetera, because there simply aren't enough people to do it. So I'd just like to have a look and see how well how good the information is that you're getting to understand both making the individual decision and also the big picture, what's happening. Snow removal effectiveness and compliance. Pretty snowy winter. Seems as though, well, I guess I won't say that we're going to have more snowy winters, we just know we're going to have more different weather, and we may have more snow, we may have less snow, but it just seemed like a good time to have a look at the various processes in place, including any contract management on third-party contractors. Next one that we're going to talk about, parks and recreation program planning. HRM continues to grow. This is an area of personal interest for me, is just how well are we planning for that growth? How well are we considering both the growth and also changing demographics? So I'd like to have a look at what Parks and Rec is doing to consider what the next X number of years looks like. Final one, similar topic in terms of touching on growth. I'd like to look at how well we're managing and maintaining our facilities and buildings. There's a lot of scary stories about the impact of deferred maintenance on government buildings out there. I'd like to see where do we stand in HRM. And again, how are we looking at what are we going to need in 5 or 10 or 20 years? Are we considering that? Are we trying to build that into our plans? Or are we simply reacting on a year-by-year basis? So as I mentioned, the specific scope of each of these audits is yet to be defined, and changes are always possible. Now, on that front, you may notice 2 audits that were on our list last year, the Cogswell Interchange and surplus IT assets. Those have yet to be completed and aren't on the list for the next round. At this point, for various reasons, both of those topics are being deferred, and we'll revisit them in the future. I think both are very valid audits, and I expect they will be completed at some point, but they're unlikely to be done in 24-25. In addition to our audits, we'll continue with our follow-up work. We have a couple of audits getting their first follow-up, corporate real estate development and the SCADA system at Halifax Water. We'll also take a look at outstanding recommendations from 2 others. So these ones have already had one follow-up with some recommendations that are still out there. So we're going to be looking at building permits and inspections along with our audit of IT at the Halifax Regional Police. Timing for each of these will be based on the availability of my staff. Generally, we look to start these as close to 18 months after the previous work was reported as we can, but we'll manage the team as best we can to get those done. That is pretty much it for me today. At this point, I'll turn it back to you folks. If you have any questions, comments you want to make today, that would be great. And if you just want to shoot me an email to suggest an audit, you've got my email address, and I always appreciate the input. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. We do have some questions. Go ahead, Councillor Stoddard.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for this presentation. I know numbers are always something that challenges us. I understood that HR was on the list for audits, but it doesn't appear in your presentation. Is that still the case?
Sorry, that was well timed. We don't have any additional work on HR. We just did our hiring practices audit, and we had done respectful workplaces a while back. So we don't have anything additional scheduled at HR right now.
Okay. All right. I was interested in the snow removal audit and compliance for Public Works. As I know, in the past, there was a value for money, and in previous years, it was said that the outside workers did a better job than the contractors. Not to put them on the line right now, but is that something that you would look at when you look at the snow removal effectiveness?
As I said, at this point, the scope is open. So I'm not defining what we're going to do.
Okay.
Absolutely, I would expect us to be looking at how those sort of decisions are made, what information is leading to using HRM workers versus contractors, and then the contract management will quite likely be part of the process as well. But that initial decision that's made to decide, are we going to use contractors or are we going to use inside workers, we'll be considering how those decisions are made.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Stoddard. Go ahead, Councillor Lovelace.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for this presentation, Andrew. I'm really happy to see that you're going to be looking at the impact of deferred maintenance for our buildings. That's great news. I'm also extremely happy to see that you're going to be looking at parks and recreation program planning, and particularly from the lens of demographics and the changing demographics. We know that we have more and more people asking for different programs and resources, so it's important for us to actually get that highlighted in a way for council to actually make informed decisions for future budgets. My question to you is on the Parks and Recreation Program planning. Will you also be looking at available assets? So for example, we continue to hear in the rural area, they'd like to have more tennis instruction. And so while it's great to have tennis instructors, if they're available, we'd also need to have access to those courts, for example, or pickleball, or, pick a sport. So I'm just wondering if you can expand a little bit on what you clarify as program planning.
Again, I'm not going to paint myself into a corner, but generally, yes. I want to see how are Parks and Rec making decisions on what is being offered, where it's being offered, how much of it is being offered, when is it being offered. How are we making those calls, and how are we planning for those calls in the future?
Okay. So you'll also be looking then, I would hope, at the resident survey, so that annual survey and the feedback that comes in from residents as well?
At the planning stage, we'll be looking at everything we can put our hands on, everything that they have, whatever they're using, whatever
Beautiful.
they deem is relevant, or whatever we deem is relevant, so.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you so much. Good work.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lovelace. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Andrew, for the presentation. Of course, the number on here that's a bit concerning is the 51% of recommendations that are yet to be implemented. And I know that we see from the follow-up on the audit report, some of those, sometimes we hear from a different business unit that a recommendation was accepted, but once they're in their action plan and do the work, it's possible that the recommendation, their acceptance of it might change, or their ability to fulfill the recommendation might change. So is there any way that that detail comes back to us in one form about where does that 51% reside in which of the audits?
I can certainly provide that detail to you. I don't have it all with me, but we have that information. In terms of the acceptance of a recommendation changing, we often have that, I'll say, suggested early in our follow-up work. Well, we're not sure we accept this piece of this anymore. Right. And I know from the last couple that I was part of, we are willing to put that as part of our report and remove that recommendation, say, okay, the management have indicated they're no longer intending to complete this. When we suggest that we will say that publicly, that tends to change the approach of, oh, well, wait a minute, maybe we will try to implement that. So I think accepting our recommendations, first of all, it's a good plan. It's a good idea. They're good. We work very hard in our office and also with management to make sure that our recommendations are helpful and are implementable. Right. Sometimes over time and distance from working with our office, folks become less inclined to do it, and that's where this group asking for action plans and checking in for status updates, my role is really to make the recommendations.
Right.
And then after 18 months, we follow up. But the value of an Auditor General is bringing those recommendations forward. And if I spent all of our time chasing them, we wouldn't have any new recommendations. Right. And that's where you folks, I really appreciate the action plans that you're asking for. And just keep pushing, keep asking questions.
So if I heard correctly, then the list of that 51%, then your office can provide to us so that we can ask better questions when it comes forward.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you. Would that be as an information report then?
I am outside of my element here on how we provide that.
Okay.
I will work. Oh. Maybe I have help coming.
Some aspects of that question, I believe, are better asked to the administration.
Okay.
Yeah, so just to explain what's happened in the last year, I became CAO in January. In February, I realized that the CAO's office was not doing centralized tracking and following up on the audit recommendations. It was a practice that used to exist in the CAO's office, but fell off sometime around COVID, I think.
Right.
May have been as a result of changes in personnel or shift in focus, I'm not sure. So anyways, we rebuilt a centralized tracking tool, which is a SharePoint site, which all business units are required to input on the status of their audit recommendations. We had that built by June. We did not launch it then because, of course, we were dealing with the wildfires and the floods during the summer. We did get it launched in the fall and are now requiring updates from business units. And right now, we're tracking 225 recommendations since 2017, and our completion rates are higher than what is reported in this report, and that's a timing difference because it won't show up in the Municipal Auditor General completion report until they do the follow-up audit and verify that what we think is complete, that they agree with is complete. So where we're tracking right now is 65% on all recommendations. We're tracking 85% on audits that have had a follow-up audit. And of course, some of the more recent audits, like for instance, the management of hiring practices audit, which was delivered at the last audit committee meeting, we're at 0% on that one. So the newer audits typically have less completion. And I will say that Andrew and I have worked together on the finalization of one audit since he's come as Municipal Auditor General. And it is exactly as he described. The draft recommendations do go through a process so that hopefully we reach a point where there's agreement from the administration to accept the recommendations. But of course, I'm an accountant too. I'm an FCPA, and I'm very firmly committed to not accepting a recommendation that I'm not in agreement with.
Right.
And if we do accept one, that as we get into looking at how we can practically put it into effect, if we get to one that looks like it's perhaps not good value for money or too expensive or the operational impact is too significant, that will be surfaced back to the Municipal Auditor General through the follow-up audit and through the reporting that we do. So I can say that I will not be blindly accepting all recommendations. And if we did have a concern that we've got a recommendation that we can't deliver, we'll be dealing with the Municipal Auditor General's office directly on it. And then it would come back to Audit and Finance through that reporting process from the Municipal Auditor General.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, CAO, for stepping in with that. I appreciate the detail. Go ahead, Councillor Hensby.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. On your reports in progress, the LED streetlight conversion project, I'm very interested in following that one closely because streetlights have been an issue of mine for many years. And back in the days when the county had local area rates and the councilor had the authority to order lights and have them installed, paid for with a local area rate, then eventually, after amalgamation, all those area rates got amalgamated into a general rate. And then there was a conversion of a lot of these, what I call private roads. And I have dug out my old file back in August 1st, 2014. HRM took over the street lighting right-of-way HRM. And back in 1998, council approved a list of 215 private street lights on private roads. And so I have a list of inventory of those. And from time to time, I keep driving around and I see street lights that have not been converted from the high pressure sodium fixtures to the LED fixtures. having questions of some lights and trying to get converted over to municipal right-of-way. There's some lights that are still on municipal property that have the old light bulbs on recreation lands, but they may not be listed as part of the public roadway, but the part of the parking lots of some of our recreational facilities. I'm thinking of Kidnap Boat Club in West Porter's Lake, for one example, off the top of my head. So I have an issue with some of the street light conversions and the list of outstanding lights that never been properly taken over or whatever the case may be. So I'm looking forward to that report in particular. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Hensby. Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Andrew, for coming in. I had buzzed in to ask the CAO to come down and chat about the 51% because we've looked at that in terms of performance review, and what she has outlined I'm very comfortable with. I remember we have had some recommendations that have come back over the years for review, and staff have said, well, that really wasn't a reasonable recommendation. But if you accept the recommendation, when the audit comes, then we have an obligation to follow it through. So I think what Kathy's talking about is something that I have great confidence in and feel very positive about. Another thing we discussed, Andrew, during the interview process, without getting into secrets of state, was that I think it was you and one other person acknowledged that they had heard the mayor of this municipality refer to having a municipal auditor general as having a colonoscopy on a regular basis. So I'm glad that was noted, because there's an old saying in politics that President Biden uses office, which is, don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternatives. And we're the only municipality in Atlantic Canada that has a municipal auditor general. And we've chosen that route, and we have renewed it, knowing that it brings forward things that will make us better, but are sometimes a little bit difficult. And when I was a little surprised to see the snow piece on there. The City of Toronto municipal auditor general did a review of snow removal, largely ended up focusing on liquidated damages from the contractors and stuff like that. That's something you would look at, obviously, in this audit is, are we getting service, particularly from the contractors, and if they're not performing, then we would penalize them?
As I've said, everything's on the table, but contractor performance would absolutely be part of it. Contract management, which would be your penalties if the contract isn't being met, would absolutely be something we will consider when we're doing our planning.
And you would talk to the contractors involved?
As necessary, yes.
Well, I think it's necessary, because I think they do a great job, frankly, and I thought we've had, a number of good years of snow removal. There will never get to be a point where we don't have complaints about sidewalks and streets. That's a fact. But I think at the very least we need to talk to the contractors and get their point of view, because they may have some recommendations that would help in our performance, as well. So I would encourage you to have that conversation. I don't think it's part of your review necessarily, because you're looking at what we're doing, but if we compared our snow removal standards to other cities, like most people would be amazed around here to understand just how stringent our standards are for snow removal. And there's a cost that comes with that. And so we have to rely on the contractors, and certainly would encourage you to have a conversation with them through the process as well and get their points of view. It's all about making us better, and so I would encourage that. Thank you for this. I appreciate the report. I look forward to seeing you at council in the near future.
Thank you. I do also. Go ahead, Andrew.
I just wanted to circle back to what the CAO and what the mayor referred to in terms of agreement with recommendations. It is possible that a business unit and auditee may disagree with a recommendation that my office decides needs to go regardless. But that would be the exception. If management don't feel a recommendation is reasonable, don't feel it's implementable, what I want to have is what Kathy talked about, that we have a conversation and that we talk about this, because, like I said, there could be the rare exception where we agree to disagree, and I feel it's important to put it out for all of you to hear and for the public to hear. But by and large, what I'm looking for is to get to recommendations that everybody agrees with and that we can move forward to get the improvements we want. So I will always encourage management, if they're uncomfortable with a recommendation, let's talk about it. Let's figure out what it is that you don't like, what it is that we're trying to accomplish. Oftentimes, it's just some wording that we're using a set of words that means something slightly different to them, and it pushes them in a different track. So I always want to have those conversations and make sure we get to a place where both sides can be content. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. And again, thank you for this report and for bringing to light all of those things that people don't want brought to light sometimes. It is difficult to do. It is difficult to acknowledge, and it is very, very necessary when we are keepers of the public purse. One of the things that sticks out for me is in the upcoming audit for snow removal effectiveness. It is always possible to be more effective, to add more salt, to spend more money, to do whatever else. One of the challenges that we have with adding more salt is the flip side of that when it is near a lake, and the salt would run into the lake and have a significant impact on that. So when you're looking at snow removal effectiveness, and especially the amount of, or type of salt that we use on the road, I would hope that you would be in touch with the Environment Department as well, lake watchers, and just make sure that we don't make one recommendation that is very positive here that has a very negative effect somewhere else. Once again, I do appreciate the report. It's always good to see you, and thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is item 13.2.1, the investment activities. Go ahead, Councillor Hensby.
The Audit and Finance Standing Committee forward the staff report dated March 4th, 2024 to Halifax Regional Council as an information item.
We have a second from Councillor Cleary. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Great. That motion passes. Thank you very much, Councillor Hensby. The next item on the agenda is the 13.2.1, the investment activities for the quarter ending December 31st, 2023. There is no presentation with this item. However, Vicki Robertson is available to answer any questions that anybody may have. Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Put the motion on the floor. It's recommended the Audit and Finance Standing Committee forward this report to Halifax Regional Council as an info item.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Lovelace. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
I would just ask if there's, I don't have a specific question, I would just ask if you have any advice for us on this or anything that we should be noticing.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the mayor. No specific advice on this, no. This is a fairly routine report. We're doing as well as can be expected given our risk profile. We are actively trying to manage the returns from the banking perspective, from the government side as well. We have a pending change to the investment policy that we believe will help us next year as well.
Thank you.
Okay, super. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I don't see any further questions on the board. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Great. That motion passes. Thank you very much, Vicki. The next few items are, there is nothing from the Grants Committee. There is nothing from members of the Standing Committee. There are no motions. We have the in-camera minutes from March 20th, 2024. Thank you, Councillor Hensby, for moving the adoption of those minutes. Thank you, Councillor Lovelace, for seconding that. All in favor of the adoption of those minutes, please. Aye. That motion passes. Thank you. There are no added items. Are there any notices of motion? I don't see any. The date of our next meeting is May 15th, 2024. With that, can I have a motion to adjourn, please? Thank you, Councillor Hensby. We stand adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.